Snow pressed her cheek against the splintered attic door, straining to hear the music drifting up from the palace below. The floorboards were cold beneath her knees, her thin dress clinging to her skin from hours of tears. Somewhere far beneath her, laughter rang out, silk gowns rustled, and the moon ceremony had begun. The one night every unmated noblewoman prayed for, the one night her mother had dreamed she would attend, was happening without her. Her stepmother's words echoed like poison in her ears. "You don't belong down there. Stay in the dark where you fit." Then the door had slammed, the lock had clicked, and her stepsisters descended the stairs draped in velvet and smug smiles, leaving her trapped in shadow. Snow dug her nails into the wood. Her bloodline was as noble as theirs. Her mother had ensured that. But nobility meant nothing when cruelty held the keys. They hadn't just stolen her gown and her chance. They had stolen her place in destiny. Downstairs a trumpet sounded. The Alpha King had arrived. Even from here the air seemed to thrum with his presence, a force that made her pulse race despite never having seen him up close. She imagined the stepsisters preening before him, presenting themselves as if they could ever be chosen. Her stomach twisted. But then, something changed. The music faltered, the crowd hushed. Through the thin air, Snow felt a strange shift as if the very house held its breath. A chill swept across her skin, raising goosebumps. She didn't know why until she caught it too, the faintest stir of wild forest air leaking through the cracks. Her own scent, carried by desperation and salt tears, drifting where it should not. Footsteps. Heavy, certain, drawing closer. The boards beneath her trembled. She froze, pressing both hands over her mouth. On the other side of the locked attic door, the footsteps stopped. For one long, impossible heartbeat, silence filled the world. Then a deep voice, low and rough with restrained power, murmured just beyond the wood. "Who's in here?" Snow's heart slammed against her ribs. The Alpha King had followed her scent. Chapter 1. Snow's breath hitched as the deep voice echoed through the wood. For a moment she thought she had imagined it, her grief conjuring illusions in the silence. But then the door handle rattled, strong and unyielding. She scrambled backward on her knees, heart hammering, torn between fear and desperate hope. No one had ever come looking for her before. Why now? Why him? On the other side, boots shifted against the floorboards, steady and deliberate. "This room is locked," the man said, his voice etched with command. She could almost see the way people must have cowered when he spoke like that. "Who locked it?" Snow pressed her back to the wall. Her throat burned with the urge to call out, but her stepmother's threats clawed at her mind. "Stay silent, or I'll make sure no one ever hears from you again." Below, muffled voices drifted up, the ceremony guests whispering nervously, the council urging the Alpha King back to the hall. But he didn't move. He lingered. And the air between them pulsed with something alive, something that made her skin prickle and her chest ache. Through the crack beneath the door his scent seeped in, smoke, pine and raw power. It was intoxicating, pulling her closer even as fear rooted her in place. She had heard stories of the Alpha King, his ruthlessness, his cold authority, the way he commanded wolves and men alike. But none of those stories had prepared her for this pull, this invisible tether between them. The handle rattled again. "Harder. Open this door," he ordered, voice low but dangerous. Snow's eyes stung. I can't," she whispered, though she knew he couldn't hear her. The lock groaned as if resisting the strength pressing against it. Her heart leapt into her throat. If he forced it open, her stepmother would know. Her stepsisters would rage. She would pay for this moment with her blood. And yet, a flicker of defiance sparked inside her chest. Maybe for once being found wasn't a curse. Maybe it was fate clawing its way through the lies that bound her. Downstairs, the music resumed weakly, the ceremony stumbling forward without its king. The nobles shifted uneasily, sensing something was amiss. But Snow's world had shrunk to the door, to the shadows, to the voice that made her tremble. The Alpha King's breath moved close, so close she felt it through the wood. Whoever you are, I will find you. The footsteps retreated, slow but purposeful. The sound faded toward the grand hall, leaving her in silence once more. Snow curled her arms around herself, trembling. He hadn't seen her. He hadn't opened the door. And yet, she knew he would not forget that moment, that scent. Somewhere in the palace, her stepsisters were likely circling him like vultures. And somewhere in his chest, she prayed, was the same hollow ache that burned in hers. The lock remained sealed, her body trapped. But her secret was no longer safe. Do you think he should have broken that door open no matter the cost? Or was his restraint the wiser choice? Comment your thoughts below. Chapter 2. The great hall of Silvercrest Palace glittered with gold chandeliers and silk-draped tables, but to Xavier it felt empty. He sat on the throne-like chair at the center dais, eyes scanning the line of noble daughters parading before him. Perfume clung to the air, mixed with the pulse of music and the anxious stares of mothers waiting for destiny to favor their bloodline. Yet his mind was not on them. His wolf still clawed at the inside of his chest, restless, distracted. That scent lingered in his nostrils, wild, raw, pure. It hadn't come from any of the women standing before him. No, it had drifted from that locked room in the shadowed corridor. The counselor at his right leaned in. Your Majesty, is something troubling you? The guests are waiting. Xavier forced his jaw to relax, though tension throbbed in his temples. He nodded curtly. Continue. One of the stepsisters stepped forward, Clara, draped in crimson silk. She curtsied too deeply, her smile brittle but eager. Your Majesty, she purred, lowering her lashes, it would be my honor to serve beside you as queen. Xavier's eyes narrowed. He had met women who craved power before. Her scent was cloying, layered in perfume that masked nothing of her desperation. Still, the hall erupted in murmurs of approval. Her family's lineage was strong, her dowry immense. By every measure of tradition she was a fitting match. And yet, his wolf recoiled. No bond. No spark. No tether. His gaze drifted across the room and landed briefly on Clara's sister, Helena, smiling with equal hunger. Something in their eyes unsettled him, a calculation too sharp, too rehearsed. Upstairs, Snow pressed her forehead to the wood, straining to hear fragments of the ceremony below. The walls muffled most of it, but she caught the rise of music, the swell of applause. She imagined her stepsisters in their stolen gowns, bowing and simpering before the Alpha King. Her chest tightened until she thought she might break. Her nails scraped the floor. She wanted to scream, to shatter the silence, to force the world to see her. But fear kept her caged. What if they punish me worse? What if he never comes back? The counselor's voice rose again in the hall. The choice is before you, Your Majesty. Tradition dictates the queen must be named tonight. The people wait. Xavier's hand flexed on the arm of his chair. Tradition. The word struck him like iron chains. But the wolf inside him growled, restless, furious. It wanted her, the one behind that locked door. He rose to his feet, his towering presence silencing the hall. The nobles froze, all eyes on their king. None of these women are my mate, he said, his voice carrying like thunder. Gasps filled the room. The stepsisters stiffened, their painted smiles cracking. Counselors exchanged horrified glances. To deny the ceremony was to challenge generations of law. Xavier's amber eyes flickered, hard as steel. And I will not choose where fate has not bound me. The hall erupted into whispers, outrage, disbelief. And in the attic above, Snow's lips parted. She didn't know how she knew, but she felt it. His refusal had been for her. Chapter 3. The echo of the king's refusal crawled through the palace like a rumor with teeth. Even after the musicians struck up a brisk reel to calm the nobles, the melody skittered, thin and brittle. Mothers pressed pearls at their throats, fathers whispered of insult and omen, and daughters stared at the dais as if a second proclamation might tumble from it and fix the rupture of the night. In the east wing, Clara ripped the clasps from her crimson gown and hurled them at the bed. "He humiliated us," she hissed, cheeks flushed a blotchy pink. "In front of everyone." Helena sat, spine rigid, fingers pinching color into her lips. He didn't even look long enough to be humiliated. His eyes were elsewhere. At the vanity, Margaret dabbed powder across her nose with measured precision, as if control could be pressed back into her face. The sight of her daughter's unraveling curdled her patience, but she bit down on it and listened. Elsewhere. Her memory snagged on a detail. During the introductions, the Alpha King had disappeared for several minutes. When he returned, his gaze was sharpened to a single point, yet not on the floor of the hall. On something above them. Her stomach tightened. "Tell me again," she said, voice calm, too calm. "There was no one left in this house who could be mistaken for a proper guest?" Clara's mouth dragged into a line. Helena's eyes flicked toward the door, then the ceiling, an instinct so quick it might have been a flinch. Margaret set the powder down. "Say her name." "Snow," Helena exhaled, shame and irritation entwined. "She's locked in the attic. She can't spoil anything from there." Margaret's smile didn't reach her eyes. "You'd be amazed what a desperate girl can spoil from anywhere." She turned away from the mirror and crossed to the window that overlooked the palace courtyard. Lanterns bobbed like low stars. Carriages rolled. Courtiers drifted in threes and fours, voices rising and falling in waves of opinion. Above all of it, the moon hung white and glaring like an accusation. "Listen to me," she said without looking back. "The king's refusal is not about you. It is about whatever he smelled when he left this hall. Wolves are simple creatures under all that pomp. If he scented the bond, he will hunt it." Clara bristled. "He could have scented it on me." "He did not," Margaret snapped, then smoothed her tone. "Which is why we cannot allow him to follow his nose where it leads." Silence thickened. Helena swallowed. "You mean?" "I mean," Margaret said, "we have one problem. And her name is Snow." Up in the attic, Snow curled her knees to her chest and ran her palms over her shins to warm them. The wood breathed cold through the boards. Her mother's old trunk sat open beside her. The silk lining rubbed thin in places where Snow had hunted for anything left behind. Pins, a scrap of ribbon, a note that said "You are enough." Nothing. Only the faint, ghost-sweet scent of lavender her mother had always tucked into drawers. She pressed her face into her sleeve and breathed until the ache loosened. "If you're ever scared," her mother had said once, guiding small fingers over leaf and stem at the garden table, "put your hands to work. Fear can't hold what your hands are already carrying." Back then, work had meant learning which herbs soothed fever and which leaves could stop bleeding, how to grind bark into a powder that calmed a racing heart. These days, work meant scrubbing steps and hiding bruises. Still, the lesson lived. Her hands wanted a task. Her heart wanted a future. Below the floor, the ceremony fluttered and faltered like a bird trapped behind glass. She had heard the king's voice earlier, low and unmistakable, and something in it had struck a chord in her bones she didn't know could sound. The thought made her shake. It was ridiculous. Dangerous. And yet, when he'd stood outside this door, her whole body had gone quiet except for the single steady drum of yes. She shut the trunk and traced the lid's worn edge. "You were wrong about one thing, Mama," she whispered, a tremor threading her voice. "You said good leaves always rise to the top of the brew. But good doesn't always rise. Sometimes it gets pushed down and told it's dirt." The door's lock gleamed dull in the dark. She stood and tested it, not because she expected it to open but because hope is a muscle and hers needed the stretch. He held to. On the far side of the palace, Xavier moved like weather through a corridor, guards falling back with the lift of his hand. The ceremony had become a theater he had no patience for. He'd abandoned it to the council's muttering and the musicians' thin smiles. The scent that had seized him still laced the air near the narrow stairwell that led to the attics. He followed it, each step quiet, deliberate. His wolf, coiled heat under his skin, rumbled at the memory of wood beneath his palm, the faint heartbeat on the other side. He'd wanted to tear the lock free and cradle whoever hid there against the world until the world learned better manners. He could still feel the restraint in his bones where he'd chained it. The council's laws were not suggestions. Neither were the expectations of 100 powerful families who dressed their hopes in silk tonight. At the landing he paused. A draft slid along the stones, edged with the slightest trace of salt and lavender. He closed his eyes. There you are. Your Majesty. A figure detached from a doorway, bowing with correct depth. Counselor Edwin, thin, silver-haired, with a gaze like a ledger. A moment. The nobles are concerned. It would steady them to hear the law from your lips. Xavier looked at the man without softening the steel in his face. The law is clear. I will not name a queen where fate is silent. Edwin inclined his head. And the law is also clear about the moon ceremony, sire. Eligibility requires presence. If a woman is not presented, she is not considered. To bend that is to break the spine of all precedent. Another, Lord Barrett, joined, his ring-heavy hands clasped politely. Think of the message. Discipline is the bedrock of strength. We cannot teach our packs that rules yield to rushes of feeling. Feeling. Xavier's jaw ticked. He shouldered past them, not roughly, but with a finality that made both men step aside. Strength that cannot bend, he said, breaks. He left them there with their thin smiles and thick books and walked the last length of corridor to the attic door. The handle was cool. The wood hummed with familiarity. He laid his palm against it, let his voice drop into a place it rarely went. I will come back for you. It wasn't a promise so much as a fact spoken aloud before the world could lie about it. Footsteps approached, the soft, hurried tread of a servant who knew she shouldn't be where she was. Xavier lifted his hand as Nora, one of the older housemaids, rounded the corner and froze. Sire, she squeaked, bowing so fast her cap slid. I didn't see, I wasn't, forgive me. What do you call this hallway? He asked, as if making idle conversation. The dust hall, she said, eyes darting to the door and away again. Nothing here but storerooms and old things. And locked things. His gaze flicked to the iron set in wood. Nora's fingers twisted in her apron. She was a good servant, loyal to the house that paid her, loyal to the fear that shaped the rules. But her eyes softened with something like pity. Some locks, Your Majesty, she whispered. Don't bite hands. They only hold keys. He should have pressed. He should have demanded names and orders and the exact shape of the secret they all pretended was furniture. Instead, he let her go with a nod and the smallest gift he could give. A look that said, I see you trying not to drown in a pool you didn't fill. Back in the East Wing, Margaret dismissed the maid who'd been unpinning her hair and poured 2 fingers of brandy into a glass. It glowed like captured fire. She took a measured sip. We will not panic. Clara paced. Then what will we do? If he scents her again? He will, Margaret said. That is the nature of wolves. They hunt until the howl answers. Helena sank to the edge of the bed. So we silence the howl. Margaret set the glass down. The plan arrived not in a rush but as a calm that slid over her like a shawl. At dawn, she said, we send Snow away. For she will sign an indenture in the northern mills. Quiet work, hard work, no one asking after pretty faces. Or we send her to the cloister by the river. Either way, she disappears before the king can build a story around her. By the time he returns to this corridor, there will be nothing behind that door but boxes. Clara brightened, ugly hope sparking. And if she refuses to sign? Then we sign for her. Margaret lifted a brow. Power is the ink that never smudges. Helena chewed her lip. And the law? If the king claims she was eligible. The law favors those who write it, Margaret said. We are not writers. But we know who is. Counselor Edwin will prefer a neat world to a romantic one. I can make neatness appealing. She rang a bell. A beat later, a footman appeared, Stephen, young enough that his ambition still showed. Margaret smiled like a mother. I need a discreet errand. Before dawn. A carriage with no crest. 2 men who don't ask questions. And you will bring me the papers from Mr. Halper at the mills. Use the service door. Be back before the sun. Stephen swallowed. Yes, ma'am. And Stephen, she added lightly, if anyone inquires after the night's events, you will say we are grieving a small family matter. Nothing more. When he'd gone, Clara smirked. Will you go to the council now? Or wait for morning? Now, Margaret said, fastening the top button of her cloak. Good men make poor decisions when they are frightened. I intend to help them be very, very frightened of what happens if the king breaks a law in public. Helena watched her mother glide to the door and felt a tremor of awe laced with dread. And Snow? She asked softly. Margaret's hand paused on the latch. She is a problem, she said, eyes turning cool as coin. Problems are easier to move than to fix. In the attic, Snow pulled the frayed ribbon from her hair and braided it by touch, the small ritual steadying her. The night had stretched so long it felt frayed at the edges. Her mind kept snagging on the memory of a palm against wood and a voice that had found the softest place in her without trying. She clamped down on that hard. Dreams were beautiful and beauty was a trap. A floorboard sighed beyond the door. She went still. Another soft, careful step. She knelt and peered through the keyhole. A lamp burned low, haloing a figure in a gray cloak. The outline was wrong for a servant and too slight for a guard. The lamp lifted, and for a heartbeat Snow saw her stepmother's mouth, composed, patient, smiling like a secret, before the flame slid away again. A scrape of metal. Something slipped under the door, a folded paper scented faintly of brandy and ink. Snow picked it up with shaking fingers. A single line in her stepmother's neat hand. Dawn is crueler than night. Sleep while you can. The footsteps retreated. Snow's pulse punched at her wrists. She unfolded the note again and again until it went soft as cloth, searching for a second message that wasn't there. Dawn is crueler than night. It was a warning or a promise or both. Across the palace, Xavier stood alone at a window, palms braced on cold stone, breath fogging the glass. The hall behind him hummed with council voices trying to thread a noose out of precedent. He let them murmur. He watched the east wing's dark line of windows, counting floors, doors, possibilities. His wolf pressed against his skin like a tide wanting shore. At dawn, something in him said, as certain as sunrise, I go back. Below, wheels whispered over cobble as an unmarked carriage rolled into the service lane, lantern hooded, driver's cap pulled low. 2 shadows climbed down and melted into the stairwell that led toward the attic landing. If you were Snow and found that note, dawn is crueler than night, would you stay quiet and wait or try to escape before morning? And if you were the king, would you confront the council now or act in secret at dawn? Tell me your choice in the comments and say where you're watching from. Chapter 4. The key scraped in the lock like metal against bone. Snow's body froze, her hands hovering in the dark as the whisper sank in. Run. She didn't recognize the voice. It wasn't the Alpha King's and it wasn't her stepmother's sharp edge. It was younger, hurried, trembling with fear. The lock clicked open. The door shuddered, then creaked an inch before halting, a shadow filling the gap. Snow's lungs tightened. For a heartbeat no one moved. Then a hand pushed through the opening, pale and shaking, holding out a folded cloak. Take it, the voice urged. Quickly. Snow pressed her back to the wall. Who are you? She whispered. Stephen, he hissed. The footman. Please, if you don't leave now, they'll drag you out by force at dawn. His eyes darted over his shoulder, terror pinching his features. I can't protect you if they come. At least this way you might have a chance. Snow's heart lurched. A cloak. A chance. But beyond the attic lay the halls owned by her stepmother, the courtyards watched by guards loyal to her. Could she make it past them? Or would fleeing only prove Margaret right, that she was a liability to be erased? Her hands shook as she reached for the cloak. The fabric smelled of dust and hay, a servant's disguise. She wrapped it around her shoulders, her mind screaming warnings even as her chest pulsed with a dangerous hope. But before she could step into the corridor, another voice sliced through the silence, calm, cold, unmistakable. "Stephen." The footman flinched like a man caught stealing. Margaret's shadow stretched across the stairwell, her figure cloaked in gray. She descended slowly, a predator savoring the prowl. "What are you doing with my daughter's cast-off?" she asked softly. "Or is it the other daughter you've come to serve tonight?" Stephen stammered, but Margaret's hand caught his chin, nails digging in. "You forget your place, boy. You serve the crown through me. Do you want to lose your position? Or something more valuable?" His knees nearly buckled. He dropped the cloak. Margaret shoved him aside, her eyes sliding to the attic door. Snow shrank back, but the lock was already unlatched. Margaret pushed it open with the slow satisfaction of a cat revealing the mouse it had cornered. "There you are," she murmured. "The little ghost who thinks she can haunt kings." Snow's chest heaved. She wanted to speak, to defend herself, but her tongue stuck to the roof of her mouth. Margaret stepped closer, each movement controlled, dangerous. "You should have stayed quiet," Margaret whispered. "But you let yourself be scented. Do you understand what that means? You are a danger to this family now. And dangers must be handled." Snow's knees trembled, but something in her mother's memory flared. Good leaves rise. She straightened, meeting Margaret's gaze. "I didn't choose this," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "But neither did you." Margaret's lips thinned. "Defiant are we? We'll see how long that lasts when the mills take you. By the time the king realizes where his nose led him, you'll be gone, swept into smoke and dust. You'll be nothing." She snapped her fingers. Two burly men appeared from the stairwell shadows, the same shadows that had swallowed the unmarked carriage earlier. They moved toward Snow with ropes in hand. Snow's breath quickened. She backed against the trunk, panic clawing her chest. If they bound her now, it was over. No one would hear her screams. No one but. He said he would come back. "Wait," she shouted, her voice cracking but loud, fierce. The men faltered, startled by her sudden fire. "Do you think the Alpha King will forgive you when he finds me gone? Do you think he won't tear this house apart stone by stone to know who stole me?" Margaret's eyes flashed, her control slipping for the briefest instant. Snow seized it. She lunged for the cloak, snatched it from the floor, and darted toward the far corner of the attic where a small, hidden window gaped. The men cursed, rushing after her. The window frame was narrow, the drop perilous, but freedom smelled sweeter than fear. She forced it open, icy night air slapping her face. Behind her, Margaret's voice rose, sharp and livid. "Stop her." Snow swung one leg over the sill. But before she could hurl herself into the night, a hand clamped around her wrist, rough, powerful, pulling her back inside. She gasped, twisting, certain it was one of the hired brutes. But when she met his eyes, they burned amber in the moonlight. "Xavier." The men froze, their ropes slackening. Margaret's face went bloodless. The Alpha King's growl filled the attic, low and lethal. "Touch her," he warned, "and you will not leave this room alive." Snow's chest heaved, torn between terror and relief. She had never been so close to him, the heat of his grip searing through her skin. His presence filled the attic like a storm, fierce and undeniable. Her stepmother bowed stiffly, her voice trembling for the first time. "Your Majesty, this is not what it looks like." "Oh, it looks exactly like treachery," Xavier said, his voice ablade. His gaze never left Snow, though, his fingers firm around her wrist. "And fate will not be hidden by locks or lies." Chapter 5. The attic was too small to contain the weight of what had just happened. Margaret's composure cracked like glass, her painted smile quivering as Xavier's grip on Snow's wrist tightened, not painfully but with a certainty that declared ownership. The two hired men edged back toward the stairwell, their bravado leaking away under the Alpha King's gaze. "Your Majesty," Margaret stammered, her voice a careful mix of reverence and panic. "You misunderstand. My daughter was confused. She attempted to flee and I—" "Your daughter," Xavier cut in, his tone sharp as a blade. "You call her daughter while you keep her locked in a prison?" His amber eyes glowed, feral and furious. "Do not think me blind. I scented her before I saw her. Fate led me here, not your lies." Snow trembled at his side, but when Margaret's eyes snapped to her, filled with venom, something inside her shifted. For years she had withered under that glare, shrinking, obeying. But tonight, with Xavier's presence grounding her, she held Margaret's gaze. Her chest still heaved, but her spine straightened. "She never wanted me to be seen," Snow whispered, her voice barely audible yet steady. "Because she knew the truth might outshine the lies." The words silenced the room. Margaret's jaw dropped, fury simmering beneath her powdered skin. Xavier's wolf rumbled approval deep in his chest. He turned toward the men. "Leave. Now." They bolted, boots thundering down the stairs. Margaret reached after them, desperate, but Xavier's glare pinned her in place. "This is treason," he said softly, dangerously. "You would sell her life for your ambition." Margaret's hands shook as she tried to mask her fear with a curtsy. "Your Majesty, please. If the council learns of this—" "They will," Xavier promised, "and so will every noble who thought tonight was a fair ceremony." The council did not have to wait long. By the time Xavier led Snow down the grand staircase, wrapped in the cloak Stephen had dropped, word had already spread. Nobles pressed in on both sides of the hall, their whispers rising like a tide. The council stood at the foot of the stairs, grim and rigid. Counselor Edwin stepped forward, his face pale with outrage. "Your Majesty, what is the meaning of this? The ceremony is sacred. Who is this woman?" Snow clutched the cloak tighter, shrinking under the weight of hundreds of eyes. Xavier's hand rested lightly at the small of her back, steadying. "This woman," he said, his voice carrying through the hall, "is mine." Gasps broke like waves against stone. Claire's painted smile shattered. Helena swayed, clutching a pillar for balance. Margaret, pale but unbowed, forced a shrill laugh. "She? My late husband's orphan? A servant in my house? Sire, surely you see the insult." "The insult," Xavier thundered, "is that you tried to bury her fate beneath your greed." The hall quaked with murmurs. The counselors exchanged frantic glances. Edwin lifted a trembling hand. "Sire, this cannot stand. She was not present at the ceremony. The law states—" "I am the law," Xavier growled, his wolf flashing through his eyes, amber and unrelenting. "And the law bows to fate." Snow's knees threatened to buckle, but she kept her head lifted. For the first time she wasn't just surviving in silence. She was standing, seen. The fire in Xavier's voice struck something inside her that whispered she was not powerless. Edwin's lips pressed thin. "If you do this, sire, you risk the stability of the throne. The nobles will rebel." "Then let them," Xavier said. His hand closed more firmly at Snow's back, steady, claiming, "Better to face rebellion with truth than rule with a lie." Snow's pulse hammered. Every instinct screamed to hide, to vanish, but she forced herself to draw one breath, then another. Her voice, quiet but clear, slipped into the charged silence. "I didn't ask for this bond," she said, her eyes flicking to the nobles, then to Xavier. "But neither did he. If fate tied us, who are we to sever it?" The hall rippled, shock giving way to unease, unease to fascination. The nobles leaned in, caught between outrage and the undeniable pull of her words. Even the council faltered. Margaret's face twisted, fury boiling past her mask. Ungrateful girl, she spat. You shame this house. Snow flinched but did not back down. This house, she said softly, was never mine to shame. But perhaps it will be again. The words hung heavy, daring, irreversible. Chapter 6. The hall still hummed with whispers when Xavier turned, guiding Snow away from the sea of eyes. His hand remained firm at her back as he led her through a side corridor, past guards who bowed stiffly, unsure whether to follow. The massive doors closed behind them with a thud, sealing the sound of scandal outside. Only when the silence stretched did Snow dare to breathe. Her pulse thrummed at her throat. She could still feel the eyes of the nobles on her, the sting of Margaret's venom, the weight of the council's disapproval. She tugged the cloak tighter, though it did little to stop her trembling. Xavier slowed, turning to face her in the shadowed corridor. The torchlight flickered across his features, highlighting the sharpness of his jaw, the burn of amber still glinting in his eyes. For the first time Snow realized how close they stood, his height towering, his scent curling around her like smoke and pine, fierce and grounding. You shouldn't have spoken, he said quietly. Her breath caught. Shame twisted in her chest until he added, but I'm glad you did. Her head snapped up, surprise flashing in her eyes. His expression softened, the steel of the Alpha King slipping just enough for her to glimpse the man beneath. They would have devoured your silence, he said, voice low. Your words made them choke instead. Snow's lips parted but no sound came. For years she had been taught to hold her tongue, to bow her head, to disappear. Tonight for one moment she had done the opposite. And the Alpha King had noticed. I don't know why this bond chose you, he admitted, his gaze unwavering, but I know I would tear down every wall in this palace before I let them take you again. Her chest ached at the raw honesty in his tone. She should have looked away but she couldn't. They'll never accept me, she whispered. I wasn't there at the ceremony. I don't belong. You belong where fate places you, he replied. And fate placed you in my path. The words hung between them, heavy, dangerous, intoxicating. For a heartbeat, the world shrank to his eyes, his voice, the steady rise and fall of his chest. Heat curled low in her stomach, foreign and terrifying. She stepped back, pressing against the wall, trying to steady her breathing. Xavier's jaw tightened as if restraining himself. He reached out, not to trap her but to gently adjust the cloak around her shoulders, his fingers brushing her collarbone. The touch was brief, yet it set her skin alight. Then the sound of hurried footsteps shattered the fragile moment. A guard approached, bowing deeply. Your Majesty, the council demands you return. They say the nobles are threatening to leave. Xavier's eyes darkened. Let them leave. The guard hesitated. Counselor Edwin insists. I know what Edwin insists, Xavier growled. He turned back to Snow, his voice gentler. Stay here. Don't open the door to anyone but me. Her chest tightened. What if Margaret comes? His eyes flared. Then call my name and I will hear it. Before she could answer, he was gone, striding toward the council chamber, his cloak snapping behind him. The council chamber blazed with candlelight, every flame flickering against rows of scowling faces. Edwin stood at the center, his silver hair gleaming, his hands clasped behind his back. Your Majesty, he began smoothly, you have thrown the court into chaos. Choosing a woman who was not present dishonors centuries of law. Already nobles threaten rebellion. Xavier's gaze swept the room, daring any of them to meet his eyes. Do you think I care for rebellion more than I care for truth? Fate does not follow your laws. Another counselor spoke up, his voice sharp. If you crown her, you will lose half the pack's loyalty. Then I will keep the half that matters, Xavier said coldly. Edwin's jaw clenched. And when war follows, will you sacrifice the kingdom for a servant girl? The wolf inside Xavier bristled, a growl vibrating low in his throat. Call her that again, he warned, and you'll see how quickly a council chamber can become a grave. Silence slammed down. No one spoke, though the air thickened with hostility. Back in the small chamber Xavier had left her, Snow sat in the quiet, twisting the edge of the cloak between her fingers. Her body still trembled with adrenaline, her mind spinning. She had stood before the court. She had spoken. And somehow she was still standing. But Margaret's warning echoed in her memory. Dawn is crueler than night. Snow stared at the door, her pulse racing. Somewhere in the palace, her stepmother was still plotting. Somewhere the council was sharpening laws into weapons. And here she was, alone, waiting, the bond pulling her into the storm whether she wanted it or not. Chapter 7. The chamber's walls felt too close. Snow paced in silence, her bare feet whispering against the rug. The longer Xavier remained gone, the more her nerves frayed. Every creak in the corridor made her heart lurch, every shadow by the door stretched like claws. When the latch finally turned, she stiffened, bracing for him. But the door swung wide to reveal not the Alpha King but Margaret. Her stepmother glided inside with the serenity of a predator that already tasted victory. 2 guards trailed her, their faces set, their loyalty bought. Snow's stomach dropped. "Did you truly think," Margaret said softly, "that hiding behind him would keep you safe forever?" Snow's back hit the wall. "He'll be back." Margaret's lips curved. "Oh, I pray he will. Let him return to find his little secret gone." She nodded to the guards. They advanced, ropes in hand, their boots thudding against the floor. Snow's breath came fast and shallow. She searched for escape. Window, hallway, anything, but the chamber was sealed. Her eyes darted to the fire poker by the hearth. Her fingers trembled, but she snatched it up, holding it like a sword. One guard chuckled. "You think you can fight us with that?" Snow's pulse thundered. "I don't think. I know." The words surprised even her, but they steadied her, shaking. Her mother's voice whispered through memory. "Fear cannot hold what your hands already carry." And tonight Snow carried fire. The first guard lunged. Snow swung clumsily, the poker clanging against his arm. He cursed, staggering back. The second reached for her, but she shoved the glowing end of the iron dangerously close to his chest. Margaret's smile wavered. "Stupid girl," she hissed. "Do you think defiance makes you queen? All it makes you is disposable." The door slammed open. Xavier stormed inside, amber eyes blazing. The guards froze, paling. Margaret tried to mask her shock, but her lips faltered. Xavier's gaze swept the scene. The poker in Snow's hands, the ropes in theirs, and his growl shook the chamber. "Touch her again," he snarled, "and your families will mourn by dawn." The guards dropped the ropes instantly, retreating to the corners. Margaret raised her chin, though fear trembled in her eyes. "You cannot protect her forever, Your Majesty. The council will not allow it." Xavier stepped between Snow and her stepmother, his presence filling the room like a storm. "Then let the council try to stand against fate." Snow's chest heaved, the poker slipping from her hands. Xavier caught it before it clattered to the ground, his touch brushing hers. His voice softened, meant only for her. "You fought back." She swallowed, tears stinging. "I had to." A flicker of pride burned in his eyes. He set the poker aside, his hand lingering over hers longer than necessary. The tension between them hummed, raw and unspoken. Margaret broke the moment with a bitter laugh. "Do you think this bond will save you from what's coming? When the council strips your crown, we'll see if she still clings to you." "Enough," Xavier commanded, his voice sharp as steel. He signaled to his guards outside. "Take her back to her estate. Under watch. She doesn't set foot in this palace again without my word." Margaret's composure cracked, rage spilling through her mask. But she curtsied, her hands trembling, and swept from the room with her lackeys. The door closed. Silence fell, broken only by Snow's ragged breathing. Xavier turned back to her, his gaze softer now, almost searching. "You're not safe with them," he said. "You'll stay here under my protection." Snow shook her head. If the council already hates me, won't this make it worse? It doesn't matter, he replied, voice low. Let them hate. Let them threaten. They will not touch you again. For a long heartbeat they stood inches apart, the air thick with everything unsaid, the pull of the bond, the fear still clinging to her, the unspoken truth that neither could deny. Snow's lips parted, but the words tangled in her throat. Xavier's hand hovered near her cheek, then dropped, restraint flickering in his eyes. Rest, he said, though his voice roughened at the edges. Tomorrow we face them together. Chapter 8. The morning broke with frost glinting on the palace stones, but the air inside the council chamber was hotter than any summer noon. Torches sputtered as nobles crowded the hall, their voices sharp with outrage. She is unfit, one shouted. She wasn't even at the ceremony, cried another. The kingdom will not follow a bond born in shadows. Counselor Edwin lifted his hands, silencing the storm. His gaze, cold and calculating, swept across the room. Order. The Alpha King must answer for this breach. Law cannot bend to whim, no matter how noble. The great doors opened and Xavier strode in, Snow at his side. Gasps rippled through the assembly. She wore only a plain gown, her hair loosely braided, yet somehow the simplicity made her presence more striking. Every eye fixed on her, judging, weighing. She swallowed hard, but she did not lower her head. Xavier stopped before the council dais, his hand lightly brushing the small of her back, steadying. His voice carried like thunder. You demanded my presence. Here I am. Speak. Edwin's mouth tightened. Your Majesty, you know the law. A queen must be chosen from those who stand at the moon ceremony. This woman, he gestured to Snow, was absent. By tradition she is ineligible. Murmurs surged. Snow's fingers clenched at her gown. She wanted to vanish, but Xavier's steady warmth kept her rooted. And yet, Xavier said slowly, fate does not bow to tradition. She is mine. Deny it all you like, the bond will not disappear. Fate does not crown queens, Edwin snapped. Law does. If you defy it, you risk rebellion, war, the collapse of every pack that swears fealty to this throne. Xavier's wolf growled through his voice. Better a war fought in truth than a peace built on lies. The nobles erupted again, divided, voices clashing. Some demanded law, others whispered of destiny. Snow's heart pounded. Every word cut into her, every eye a dagger. Part of her wanted to flee, but another part whispered, if you run now you lose everything forever. She drew a breath, then stepped forward. The hall hushed. Her voice was soft, but it carried. I never asked to be here. I never asked for fate to tie me to him. But do you truly believe I wanted to hide in an attic while others danced? Do you think I chose to be locked away, silenced, erased? If you punish me for that, then you are not protecting law. You are protecting cruelty. The chamber rippled, nobles shifting uneasily. Some lowered their eyes. Others straightened in challenge. Xavier's gaze burned with pride, though he said nothing. This moment was hers. Edwin's jaw clenched. Words change nothing. If she stays, the throne fractures. If she goes, the kingdom remains whole. Snow's chest tightened. Her stepmother's warning echoed. Dawn is crueler than night. Maybe this was the dawn she'd been meant to fear. Xavier reached for her hand, clasping it openly before the council. Gasps broke the silence. His voice, low but unyielding, cut through every corner of the chamber. Then let it fracture. I will not trade my mate for your peace. The counselors recoiled, whispers breaking into alarm. Edwin's eyes glittered like cold steel. Then you choose love over crown, sire. May you remember the weight of that choice when the wolves at your borders come for blood. Xavier's grip tightened around Snow's fingers. He didn't flinch. Let them come. Snow's heart thundered. She should have been terrified, but instead, a strange calm spread through her chest. For the first time in years, someone had chosen her, openly, without shame. That night, in the quiet of a private chamber, Snow sat by the fire, the flames painting her face in gold. Xavier stood by the window, his shoulders tense beneath his cloak. "You risked everything today," she whispered. He turned, eyes burning with something raw. "For you I would risk more." The bond hummed between them, undeniable. Snow's breath caught, her pulse fluttering. She wanted to step forward, to close the distance, but fear tangled with longing. "You don't even know me," she whispered. His voice dropped, fierce and soft all at once. "I know enough. I know the way my wolf stills when you breathe. I know the scent of your fear makes me want to burn the world that caused it. I know I would rather lose the throne than lose you." Her eyes stung with tears she hadn't meant to shed. Slowly she rose, her steps hesitant but steady. When she stopped before him, close enough to feel the heat radiating from his body, his hand lifted, hovering near her cheek, trembling with restraint. "Snow," he murmured, her name a promise. She leaned the slightest inch forward, her breath mingling with his. For a heartbeat the world tilted, the bond pulling them closer, closer. A knock shattered the moment. "Your Majesty," a guard's voice barked from outside. "The council calls an emergency session. They claim the throne may be forfeit." Xavier closed his eyes, jaw tight. Snow stepped back, her chest aching with what almost was. Chapter 9. The knock at the door had been the beginning of the end. By the time Xavier strode into the council chamber, Snow was alone again, her heartbeat still tangled with the almost kiss they'd been denied. She pressed her fingers to her lips, shoving the ache down. But her gut whispered what she didn't want to hear. The council would never stop until they tore her away from him. And they struck faster than she imagined. Guards arrived under the guise of escorting her safely to a guest room. She obeyed at first. Xavier had told her not to open the door to anyone but him, but these wore his crest. Yet once she stepped into the corridor, their grip tightened, not protective but restraining. "Where are we going?" she demanded, fear slicing her voice. "Orders of the council," one muttered. "You'll stay elsewhere tonight." Her pulse spiked. Elsewhere. That word tasted like chains. She struggled, but their hold was iron. Down twisting halls they dragged her, not toward the royal wing but toward a carriage waiting in the servants' courtyard. Snow's chest seized. "No. He'll come for me," he promised. A cloth pressed to her mouth. The world blurred. Her last thought before darkness swallowed her was Xavier's voice. "I will come back for you." When she woke, the air reeked of damp and mold. Stone walls closed around her, a single slit of light bleeding through a barred window. Shackles bit at her wrists and straw scratched beneath her palms. The dungeons. Panic clawed her throat, but she forced herself to breathe. If she broke now, she was lost. Somewhere above, the council was no doubt telling Xavier she had fled, that she had proven herself unworthy, weak, treacherous. It was their word against hers, and she was trapped in silence. Steps echoed. Edwin appeared beyond the bars, his expression composed, smug. "You see, girl, the king may defy us, but law cannot be broken by sentiment. By morning he will believe you ran. And when he does, he will let you go, because even a wolf cannot chase what abandons him." Snow's fists clenched around the chains. "He won't believe you." Edwin smiled thinly. "We shall see." He left her in darkness. Meanwhile, Xavier's fury shook the council chamber. "You dare say she fled? You dare claim she abandoned me?" Edwin bowed slightly, his calm a deliberate provocation. The guards saw her leave. She slipped away. "Perhaps the bond clouded your judgment, sire. She was never meant for this throne." "Lies!" Xavier roared, his wolf surging, amber burning in his eyes. His hands trembled with the need to tear the chamber apart. She would never run. But the seeds of doubt scraped at him. He had known her only days. Could he trust the bond more than the testimony of men who had served the crown for decades? In the dungeon, Snow pulled against her chains until her wrists burned. Tears stung, but she swallowed them. She would not break. Not this time. Her mother's words came back. Put your hands to work. Slowly, carefully she tested the lock. The pin on her braid was thin metal. She twisted it free, fingers shaking. She could just force the mechanism. The scrape of steel on steel sang in the silence. The shackle gave way with a click. Hope surged like fire. But before she could free the other wrist, footsteps thundered above. A voice shouted down the stairwell, "The king is coming this way." Her heart leapt. Xavier. He hadn't believed them. He had come for her. The dungeon door burst open. Light and power filled the room as Xavier strode in, guards at his back. His gaze locked on her, chained and bruised, and the fury that crossed his face nearly split the air. Snow. Her lips trembled. You came. He crushed the lock with one hand, snapping the shackle like twigs, pulling her into his arms. His scent, smoke and pine, enveloped her, and for the first time in hours she could breathe. But Edwin's voice carried from the stairwell. You see, Your Majesty? This is the cost of disobedience. If you claim her, the kingdom burns with you. Xavier turned, snow still in his arms. His voice was lethal. Then let it burn. I will not lose her. Snow clutched his cloak, her fear and relief colliding. The bond between them pulsed stronger than ever. But the threat was clear. The council would stop at nothing to break them. Chapter 10. The council summoned the kingdom by dawn. Bells tolled across Silvercrest, pulling nobles, elders, and even common pack members into the great courtyard. The air crackled with tension. Word of the scandal had spread like wildfire. Snow stood beside Xavier on the raised dais, her hands trembling within his grasp. She had never felt so exposed. Hundreds of eyes pierced her, half with scorn, half with wary curiosity. Margaret stood among the nobles, her face carefully arranged into grief, as though she were the victim of her stepdaughter's betrayal. Counselor Edwin raised his voice. People of Silvercrest, you have been summoned to witness the truth. Our Alpha King has abandoned tradition, claiming a woman who was never presented at the moon ceremony. Tonight law itself is at stake. Will we bow to chaos or preserve order? The crowd murmured, restless. Some shouted agreement. Others muttered of destiny. Xavier stepped forward, pulling Snow with him. His voice thundered. You speak of order, Edwin, but you chained it to lies. You locked away the one fate chose for me, and you dare call me traitor? Look upon her. He lifted Snow's hand high, amber eyes burning. Do you feel the bond humming between us? No law can sever what the moon itself has tied. Gasps rippled. Snow's cheeks flushed, but she forced herself to meet the crowd's gaze. I was hidden, she said, her voice shaking but clear. Locked away by those who feared what I might be. But you cannot erase truth. I am no pretender. I am his mate. The murmurs swelled. Some looked uncertain, but others, especially the younger wolves, nodded, eyes alight with recognition of her courage. Margaret stepped forward, her mask cracking. She's nothing. A servant girl. Will you all let a nobody wear the crown meant for noble blood? Xavier's wolf growled so loudly the crowd fell silent. Better a servant with honor than nobles who rot with greed. Edwin lifted his hand again, desperate. If you crown her, sire, you doom the throne. Tradition is the spine of our people. Snow's voice rang out, stronger now. Then maybe it's time the spine bent before it breaks. The courtyard went still. Her words cut like lightning through the dawn air. For a long moment nothing moved. Then an elder wolf in the crowd raised his voice. Fate does not lie. If she is his mate, she is ours too. Others echoed him, voices rising, until the crowd swelled with agreement. The tide shifted before the council's eyes. Xavier pulled Snow close, his voice final. From this day forward she is my queen. Challenge it, and you challenge the bond the moon itself forged. The people held their approval, the sound shaking the stones. Edwin paled, his power crumbling. Margaret's scream of rage was swallowed by the roar of the pack. Xavier turned to Snow, his eyes softening. He lowered his forehead to hers, their breaths mingling. "You are mine," he whispered, not as a command but as a vow. Snow's lips trembled into the faintest smile. "And you are mine." The bond pulsed, undeniable, and the kingdom witnessed it. The book. Weeks later, the palace no longer felt like a prison. Sunlight spilled across the courtyards, laughter echoed through the halls. Snow walked at Xavier's side. On the first full moon after the coronation, they stood before the Pax, hand in hand. The same moon that had once witnessed her captivity now crowned her freedom. She now lifted her chin, chosen and unafraid. Xavier's gaze lingered on her with quiet pride. "You rose from the dark," he whispered. "And you found me there," she answered with a genuine smile visibly on her face. The crowd howled their blessing as the moonlight bathed them both. Snow closed her eyes, her heart full. The girl who had once been hidden was hidden no longer. She was seen, claimed, loved, and she belonged. Tell me your favorite moment in this story, and don't forget to say where you're watching from. Did you believe Snow was brave enough to become queen, or did she surprise you? I want to hear your thoughts in the comments section. Please like and subscribe to my channel for more werewolf romance.